People don't want truth, Freud's darkest secret. Have you ever wondered why you avoid certain thoughts? I mean, really avoid them like they're radioactive. Why are there some truths we'd rather never uncover, even though they might set us free? Why is it that deep down, when no one's watching, we choose comfort over clarity, illusion over illumination, fantasy over fact? What if I told you that Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, had a secret? A dark, unspoken conclusion he came to near the end of his life. It wasn't in the textbooks, it wasn't in the lectures. It was a truth so unsettling that even he, the man who spent decades peeling back the unconscious layers of the human mind, rarely confronted it head on. This secret wasn't about sex or dreams or even repression. It was more terrifying than all of those. It was this: people don't want the truth. Not just sometimes, not just when it's hard. I mean, ever. Let that sink in. Because if that's true, if human beings are not seekers of truth, but avoiders of it, then what does that say about the lives we live? The decisions we make? The beliefs we cling to? What does it say about you? Freud spent his life dissecting the human psyche. He believed that much of our behavior is dictated by unconscious forces, drives, desires, traumas, fears that we're not even aware of. He gave us the idea of repression, that we bury painful truths so deeply we forget they ever existed. But by the end of his life, Freud began to suspect something even more disturbing. He began to see that repression wasn't just a defense mechanism, it was a design feature. That we are built to reject truth, not just because it hurts, but because it threatens the fragile illusions that hold our reality together. Think about it. What happens to a person who suddenly sees the full truth about their life? The lies they've told, the masks they wear, on the compromises they've made. It can be shattering. Life as we live it is a house of cards carefully constructed on stories we tell ourselves. I'm a good person. They deserved it. I had no choice. Everything will be okay. But what if those stories are just that, stories? What if the truth is messier, darker, more chaotic than we can handle?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Freud's secret wasn't just theoretical. It was personal. He watched patients come to the edge of self-awareness on the brink of epiphany and then retreat. Not because they couldn't understand the truth, but because they did. They felt it. And they ran. And don't we all? How many times have you sensed something uncomfortable rising in your mind, some insight about your behavior, your past, your motives, and instantly distracted yourself? Opened your phone, watched a video, scrolled, anything to avoid that moment of clarity. Here's a brutal question. What if the truth isn't what sets you free, but what destroys your comfort, your certainty, your identity? Would you still want it? That's the paradox Freud came to face. He started as a man who believed in the curative power of truth, that if we could just bring the unconscious into the light, we'd be healed. But by the end, he realized that truth is not what people want. People want narratives. They want meaning, not accuracy. They want coherence, not chaos. And truth. The real truth, it rarely gives us either. Let me get personal. I build videos, stories, entire worlds that people escape into. And I love doing it, but I've also seen what happens when you try to give people too much reality at once. They shut down, they rebel, they unsubscribe from truth. And here's the kicker, I've done it too. We all do. Because the truth isn't just hard, it's lonely. It separates you from others, it isolates. It strips away the comforting lie society is built on. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Take religion, for example, or politics, or relationships. So much of our identity is tied up in beliefs we inherited, not ones we chose. And when those beliefs are challenged, we don't respond with curiosity, we respond with defense. Not because we're evil or stupid, but because we're wired for survival. And survival requires stability, even if that stability is based on illusion. So maybe Freud's darkest secret isn't really about psychology. Maybe it's about philosophy. Maybe it's about the human condition. What if we're not rational beings who sometimes lie to ourselves, but deluded beings who occasionally glimpse the truth only by accident? What if truth is like the sun, you can look at it briefly, but stare too long and it burns you? Do you really want to know yourself? That's not a rhetorical question. Do you really want to know why you do what you do? Who you really are beneath the roles, the filters, the masks? Because if you say yes, understand this, there is a price. A cost to truth. And most people, Freud believed, are unwilling to pay it. But here's the twist. Freud may have been right about people, but you are not people. You're here, watching this, listening, asking. And that means something. It means you're willing to peek behind the curtain. And once you do even just a little, it changes everything. So let's go deeper. I want to ask you something no one else will. Why do you think you're scared of knowing the truth about yourself? Next, we're going to explore the ways our minds actively protect us from truth and how even our highest ideals may be elaborate illusions. The mind's defense, how illusions keep us sane. If we accept Freud's premise that people don't actually want the truth, then we're forced to ask a deeper, more disturbing question. What is the mind doing to protect us from the truth? Because the human mind isn't passive. It doesn't simply lack truth. It hides from it, dodges it, rewrites it. It builds entire systems, ideologies, memories, religions, personal narratives designed not to reflect reality, but to filter it, to shape it into something we can bear. And the scary part is, most of the time, we don't even know it's happening. You see, the mind has defenses, not just psychological defenses like repression or denial, but philosophical ones, existential ones. These defenses are not flaws, they're features. Without them, most of us would collapse under the weight of raw reality. Think about what it would mean to see the world as it really is without the veil of meaning or purpose or specialness. Is to see yourself not as the protagonist in a noble story, but as a temporary swirl of atoms in a vast, indifferent cosmos. To see your parents not as heroes or villains, but as broken people doing the best they could. To see your beliefs not as truths, but as comforting myths passed down like heirlooms. That kind of clarity isn't liberating. It's devastating. And so the mind protects you. It lies to you for your own good. This is what Freud eventually saw, that most of our mental activity is not about discovering what's real, but about maintaining functional illusions. The illusion of control. The illusion of certainty. The illusion of self. These illusions keep us grounded. They give us the strength to get out of bed, to love, to work, to hope. But they also keep us blind. Let's take a simple example, memory. You probably think your memories are accurate, maybe a few minor details get fuzzy, but the core events are real, right? Wrong. Memory is one of the most unreliable narrators in your life. It doesn't record events, it reconstructs them. And it reconstructs them based on what you need to believe about yourself. If you think of yourself as a victim, your mind will highlight every injustice. If you think of yourself as resilient, it will downplay the pain. Your past is a story constantly being edited to protect your present identity. The truth. It's gone. Rewritten. And you didn't even notice. Now scale that up, apply it to your beliefs about the world, about politics, about morality. Notice how you tend to read articles that confirm what you already believe. How you distrust information that challenges your worldview. That's not laziness, that's a defense mechanism. Cognitive dissonance, the discomfort of holding contradictory beliefs, is not something the mind tolerates easily. So it resolves the conflict by bending reality to fit your existing framework. You're not choosing to be ignorant. Your mind is choosing for you. And here's the kicker, even your values, your highest ideals might be illusions. Think about that. We like to believe we value honesty, compassion, justice. But those values often serve deeper, hidden agendas. Sometimes we're honest because it makes us feel superior. Sometimes we're compassionate because we want to be seen that way. Sometimes we fight for justice not because we care about the cause, but because it gives our life a sense of meaning. Are we really driven by principle, or are we driven by the deep psychological need to matter? Freud's genius was in seeing that the mind is not a lighthouse shining truth into the darkness. It's a fortress. And the truth, it's the enemy at the gates. The mind patrols its borders with rationalizations, with projections, with selective attention. It creates a version of reality that allows you to function, but not necessarily one that allows you to grow. So what do we do with that? If even our noblest beliefs might be shadows on the wall, how do we ever get closer to what's real? The answer isn't easy, but it starts with humility. It starts with recognizing that your mind is not a reliable narrator, that your beliefs are not sacred, that your identity is not fixed, that everything you think you know might be a carefully constructed illusion. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. And then comes the second step, courage. The courage to ask yourself terrifying questions. What am I refusing to see? What am I afraid would happen if I let go of this belief? Who would I be without this identity? Without this story? Without this mask? These are not casual questions. They're the kind that shake foundations. But they're also the only questions that lead to truth. Here's the painful irony. The mind defends us from truth because it fears that truth will destroy us. But what if that's a lie too? What if truth doesn't destroy but transforms? What if the pain of seeing clearly is the price of becoming whole? In the next part, we're going to explore that possibility. We'll dive into how some people do face the truth and what happens to them. We'll look at what it really means to wake up and whether it's worth the cost. Ask yourself this and mean it. If everything you believe turned out to be false, would you still want to know? Waking up, the cost of seeing clearly. There's a moment rare, fleeting, but unforgettable when the illusion cracks. When something in your reality doesn't quite fit, doesn't click, doesn't hold. It's like a glitch in the matrix, a shimmer in the fabric of your perception. And in that moment, something inside you wakes up. It's not a light turning on, it's more like a veil falling away. You see a truth, maybe small, maybe massive, that was always there, but somehow hidden. And once you see it, you can't go back. That's the beginning of waking up. And it's not a peaceful awakening. It's a rupture. Think of the people who've radically changed their lives not on a whim, but because they had to. Because they saw something about themselves or their world that they couldn't ignore anymore. The man who realizes his entire career has been about pleasing a father who never loved him. The woman who recognizes that the marriage she's in is a performance, not a partnership. The activist who discovers that the cause they've devoted their life to is built on a foundation of lies. These are not TV drama moments. They're real and they are brutal. Because waking up often means losing everything that made you feel safe. There's a reason most people don't change. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they know on some level that change begins with destruction. To wake up from a dream, you have to let go of the dream. And that includes the parts that were beautiful, comforting, and familiar. That includes the roles you played, the stories you told, the person you thought you were. Waking up is not about gaining something, it's about shedding. About peeling back everything false, everything performative, everything borrowed. And that process is terrifying. Freud understood this, but so did thinkers like Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Simone Weil. They all knew that truth is not an intellectual concept, it's an existential earthquake. Nietzsche called it a revaluation of all values. Kierkegaard called it fear and trembling. Weil called it attentive silence. These awakenings are not loud. They're not flashy. They don't come with applause. They come in the stillness and the unbearable honesty of looking at your life without flinching. But here's the thing, once you wake up, the world changes. Not because the world itself is different, but because you are. You start to see patterns you never noticed before. Motivations yours and others become transparent. You begin to hear the silences between the words people say. You notice how often people perform instead of speak. You see the machinery behind the mask. And that clarity can feel like a superpower, but also like a curse. Because now you're walking through a world still asleep. You're surrounded by people who are clinging to their stories, their illusions, their defense mechanisms. And you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't laugh at the same jokes or believe in the same heroes or participate in the same rituals because now they feel hollow. You start to feel separate, not better, not superior, just alone. That's the real cost of waking up. Not just the loss of illusion, but the loss of belonging. And yet, despite all that, some people still choose to wake up. Why? Because even though the truth burns, it also purifies. Because when you let go of the false, what's left is real. And there is a kind of peace that comes with that. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of alignment. Of knowing that your inner world and your outer world are not at war. And that you are no longer lying to yourself. That you are living in accordance with the truth, even when it costs you everything. That kind of peace is rare, but it's possible. And it's worth the pain. There's a story I love. A monk once asked his master, what happens after enlightenment? And the master replied, you chop wood and carry water. In other words, life goes on. The world doesn't change. The illusions remain, but you are no longer a prisoner of them. You still walk through the world, but now you walk awake. So let me ask you again, do you really want to wake up? Do you want to see not just the truth about the world, but the truth about yourself? Because if you do, you'll have to give up more than lies. You'll have to give up your attachment to being right. Your need to be liked. Your addiction to certainty. And most of all, you'll have to give up the idea that truth is comfortable. That's not. But it is liberating. Because in the next and final part, we'll go even deeper. We'll explore what happens after the awakening when you're living without illusion, without the old stories, without the comforting lies. We'll talk about how to build a life anchored in truth and why that might be the most radical act of all. Living without illusion, the radical power of truth. So what happens after you wake up? After the lies fall away, after the comforting illusions shatter, after you see yourself in the world clearly, maybe for the first time, it's not what most people think. There's no parade, no grand revelation, no instant bliss. What you're left with is something quieter, deeper, and far more dangerous freedom. And not the kind of freedom people post about on social media. I mean, the inner kind, the freedom to see, to choose, to live without pretending. But let's be honest, freedom is terrifying. Most people don't want freedom. They want structure, identity, validation. They want beliefs handed to them, roles assigned, meaning pre-packaged. Real freedom means taking full responsibility for your life. No more blaming your parents. No more hiding behind tradition. No more saying that's just the way I am. When you live without illusion, you can't rely on excuses. You have to face every moment with open eyes. And that's rare, that's radical. Living in truth doesn't mean you figured everything out. It means you've accepted that you never fully will. It means you've stopped pretending that life is supposed to be neat or fair or make perfect sense. It means you've stopped demanding certainty from a universe built on mystery. And in that surrender, something incredible happens. You start to see beauty where you never saw it before. Not in perfection, but in realness, or in rawness, in the unfiltered, chaotic, astonishing complexity of existence. You start to love things as they are, not as you wish they were. You stop trying to fix people. You stop needing to win arguments. You stop performing. Instead, you start listening, observing, noticing. You begin to feel the weight of each moment not as something to escape, but something to inhabit. That's the power of living without illusion. You're no longer running, you're being. But this kind of life comes with a cost. You'll lose people. Some friends will drift away because they're still clinging to the stories you've let go of. Some relationships will fracture because they were built on shared illusions. You'll feel alien at times, like a stranger in your own culture. But you'll also attract others who are awake. People who don't need you to be perfect or agreeable or scripted, just real. And those connections, they're deeper than anything you ever had before. This is the life Freud glimpsed but couldn't fully articulate. A life not ruled by repression but by awareness. A life that doesn't depend on denial but on courage. And it's not just psychological. It's spiritual. It's philosophical. When you stop running from truth, you begin to align with something bigger than yourself, not a God necessarily, but a kind of integrity, a wholeness. You become a vessel of truth in a world full of facades. And that changes everything. So where does that leave us? It leaves us on the edge of comfort, the edge of illusion, the edge of the life you were told to live and the life that's truly yours. You can step back. Most do. Or you can step forward into the unknown, into reality, into truth. Not because it's easy, not because it's glamorous, but because it's real. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. So I'll leave you with a final question, one that Freud wrestled with silently, and one you must answer for yourself. If truth cost you everything, your comfort, your certainty, your identity, would you still choose it? That's the real test. That's the path. That's the secret Freud couldn't say out loud. Because deep down, he knew people don't want truth. But maybe you do.